It's a risk. Like a risk. Oh, clicker. Esteban, would you hand me my clicker? It's right there. Yes, I am a professional. Don't try this at home. So as I mentioned earlier in the service, we have people of many, many different faiths in this center. We have hardcore religious scientists like myself. We have people who consider themselves Christian, and yet they love coming here for the positive message and the open-mindedness. We have recovering Catholics, a lot of those. We have people who are Jewish. They go to temple on Friday night, and they come here on Sundays. We have people who have an Eastern bent toward Hinduism and Buddhism. We have people who follow the earth-based traditions, such as paganism, Wiccan, and the Red Path. We have people who want spirituality, but they don't want the dogma of any organized religion. I think that's probably a lot of people here. And we have people who don't know what they are, and are not quite sure what they believe. They just like the energy and the atmosphere of the center. Did I pretty much name them all? I got you? Yeah. We are an equal opportunity spiritual center. And regardless of what your individual belief or tradition is, there is something that binds us together, something that unifies us. I call it the life force energy. It's that idea that we are all connected, that we are all coming from the same source, from the same essence. Essence, essential, that same essence. So on any Sunday, most of you know this, you might hear me quote the Bible. I often do it poorly, but I try to get it in there. I may talk about Oprah or Deepak. I may quote my mother, quote the Buddha, may quote Albert Einstein. Heck, I quote Homer Simpson sometimes. Because truth can be found anywhere, including the Bible. So there is this story about a young couple who is arguing. They're fairly newly married, and they're arguing about the different chores that each one of them is supposed to do in the marriage. And he says, you're the one that's supposed to make the coffee because it's your job to do the meals and all this other kind of stuff. And she says, no. She says, it's the husband's job to make the coffee. It's in the Bible. And he says, oh, really? Prove it. So she gets her Bible and she opens it up and she says, right here, Hebrews. As I'm looking around, the women are laughing uproariously. And the men are like, whatever. So because most of us were raised in a Judeo-Christian background and tradition, that's what's most familiar to us. So it's particularly fun this time of year because we got all kinds of holidays that are going on right now. We got Hanukkah, which you're going to learn about today. We got the winter solstice, which is December 21st. We got, of course, Christmas. And a lot of people think that Kwanzaa fits in there, but Kwanzaa is actually not a religious holiday. It's a cultural holiday that celebrates the traditions of Africa. So don't include that in a spiritual talk like this. So in keeping with our Judeo-Christian roots, we're going to celebrate Hanukkah. We're going to learn about the Festival of Lights. Who's excited? Yes? Yeah. We're going to look at the story, which is a very cool story. It has a metaphysical meaning. We're going to talk about the metaphysics of it. And then we have a couple of our congregation who are going to come up and light the menorah and do a blessing for us. I know. How cool is that? I know. So I need to start out by telling you that I've always been a little fascinated with the idea of Hanukkah. Because when I was a little kid and I found out that they got 8 presents, one each night, I was really jealous, because my birthday is Christmas Eve, so I've got to wait a whole year before I get presents. So the idea of getting 8 presents, that looked pretty good for me, right? It was only after I became an adult that I learned that Hanukkah, while being an observed holiday in Judaism, is actually not considered one of the biggies. You know, our biggies in Christianity are Christmas and Easter. In Judaism, the really, really important holy days are Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. They're called the high holy days, in fact. So Hanukkah isn't one of those major religious traditions. However, it's become super popular because it always comes around the time of Christmas. So we're already in a celebrational mode. But the dates change. The dates change because Hanukkah is based on a lunar calendar as opposed to the Gregorian calendar. So that's why it kind of moves around, but it's always around this time of year. So now I'm going to tell you the Hanukkah story. In my opinion, I just love this story. It's the ultimate story of faith and belief and triumph of good with a few miracles thrown in. And of course, this is the time of miracles, right? Miracles like a virgin birth and angels on high and fat men in red suits and flying reindeers, you know? Well, Hanukkah has a few miracles of its own. So here goes. Back in the day, in the land of Judah, which is kind of like modern day, where modern day Jerusalem is, that land was ruled over by the Syrian king, Greek-Syrian king by the name of Antiochus. And Antiochus was not a very nice man. And he ordered all of the people, regardless of their faith, to worship the same Greek gods that he was worshiping. And he forbade them to practice any of their traditions or to read or study the Torah, nothing like that. And then to make matters worse, because like I said, he wasn't a very nice guy, he and his soldiers took over the temple. And they removed all the sacred Jewish symbols and they replaced them with pagan symbols. And this was considered absolute desecration to the Jews. So needless to say, they were not happy about this. So a band of resistance fighters called the Maccabees went to battle against Antiochus and his evil army. And this was unbelievable because there were tons of Assyrian Greeks, and you always think of them as being really big, burly guys, you know, like seasoned soldiers, right? And then you just have these few Maccabees, right? And yet, against all odds, they won the battle. The Maccabees won the battle. And that's the first Hanukkah miracle that is celebrated. Because this little small army of absolutely dedicated people could overcome this much larger, much more experienced army. You'd almost think that they were relying on a higher power, wouldn't you? Well, what we teach from a metaphysical standpoint is that good will always triumph over evil, perceived evil. In our teaching, we don't really believe in evil. We believe that people may act in an evil or a misguided way, but there isn't an entity, there isn't a force called evil. Do you understand that? There isn't a guy named Satan that's like sitting around trying to mess with us, okay? There isn't that. In fact, this is what Ernest Holmes said. He said, if good comes in, evil goes out. It cannot help it. It cannot stay. We, in a certain sense, think evil is a negative thought force. It seems to have a kind of personality. Evil seems to try to destroy good, but it cannot. Just like light, just like darkness doesn't exist. Darkness is simply the absence of light. You bring light into a dark situation, and the darkness does not exist. It never did exist. It is simply the absence of light. The same thing is true about evil. It is simply the absence of good. I didn't plan to tell you that. That was a download. That was a download. Because what we believe in this teaching is that good is the prevailing impulse of life. Good is the prevailing impulse of the universe. And those that we think are acting in an evil way are simply out of alignment with good. So when the Christmas story that I just shared with you, it seemed like the Maccabees were in alignment with good, and the Syrian Greeks were out of alignment with good. The Jews, the Maccabees, were not trying to take over a religion. They weren't trying to convince anybody of anything. They were only defending their right to worship their God their way. So they were in alignment. Is this making sense?
Yes.
Okay. Because this, when we are expressing ourselves in our own way, that makes us in alignment with the creative principle. Because the creative principle is all about freedom and self-expression. So it isn't that God was favoring the Jews over Antiochus, it's that the Jews were using the God principle, the law of God, in a constructive way. They were aligned with good, they were expressing, and they were working toward their freedom. Yes?
Yes.
You with me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to continue the story because it gets even better. After the Jews had driven Antiochus out and all them, and they left, they went into the temple to pray. And what they found was absolutely awful. It had been trashed. There were pagan statues everywhere. Their artifacts, their sacred things had all been either removed or destroyed. So according to Jewish law, everything needed to be energetically purified by burning sacred oil in the menorah. However, the oil that they found had also been desecrated. So they only had a tiny little bit of the pure oil that they could burn in the menorah, just enough to light the menorah for one day. And it would take 8 days to prepare more purified oil. Well, this is where the story gets really good, because in complete faith, not knowing what to expect, but absolutely believing in the possibility of a miracle, they went ahead and lit the menorah anyway. And guess what happened? You guys remember this from your history story? Even though it was thought that there was only enough oil for one day, the menorah stayed lit for 8 days. That is the Hanukkah miracle. That is the miracle that is celebrated during this holiday, because they call it the Festival of Lights. So during the 8 days of Hanukkah, where they all get presents, anyway, during the 8 days of Hanukkah, they light one candle for each of the 8 days the menorah stayed lit. Yeah. And the children are given gifts to celebrate the abundance. Celebrate God's abundance. So what does this teach us? For one thing, it teaches us that if the Jews could manifest miracles like that 2,200 years ago, we can do similar things now. We just have to believe that we can. It is a matter of faith. There's another really important point that I want to make here. This is really key. The Jews did not just sit around bemoaning their fate, or they didn't pray and just sit around and wait for their prayers to be answered. No. They went about their business. They did their prayer work. They purified the oil. They cleaned up the temple. They took action while they were praying. Yes? Can I get a no Hanukkah for that? This showed incredible faith. It showed incredible expectation. They went about their business, doing their prayer work and taking action. In our teaching, we call it treat and move your feet. Treat and move your feet. In other words, say your prayers, absolutely do your spiritual work in mind, and continue on doing the business of living. Because the answer of prayer comes when we are going about our business, not when we're sitting around waiting for it to happen. And the cool thing is that when we receive the answer to prayer, it builds our faith more. You understand what I'm saying? Oliver, I wish he was still here. Oliver is a perfect example of that when he got the parking spaces. First one, then two, then three, 4, 5, 6, 7. His faith was built every time he had a demonstration. Every time he had an answer to prayer, it built his faith. And the more faith we build, the more powerful our prayers are. Ernest Holmes says, trained thought is more powerful than untrained thought. So the more we train our thought, the more we put our focus, the more we build our faith like that, the more powerful our prayers have. Because it's this amazingly creative tool. Faith and belief can cause incredible things to happen. Just ask the Maccabees. So the final point that I want to make about today is about supply. Is about supply. Because the oil in that lamp, in that menorah, lasted 8 days because it came from a limitless source. And that source is God. Now, how it burned for 8 days, we'll never know. It could be that people had oil hidden, right? And they brought it and fed that oil. Or maybe there was more oil than they thought. Or maybe it was a miracle. We don't need to know what the real story is. All we need to know is that their faith accessed a limitless wellspring, a limitless source of the divine, and it found a way to keep that menorah lit. And we've all been there, folks. I know many of you. We have all felt that we have given and given and given, and we don't have anything else to give, that we're running on empty. But just like the oil in that lamp, we've been able to reach down inside of ourselves, beyond the human limitations that we have in our minds. We've all been able to reach down deep inside of ourselves and tap into that limitless source of our being. Where that source, it is nothing less than God expressing itself as each one of us. That's the true miracle. The fact that we all have within us an unlimited well of good. We just need to remember to tap into it. And we tap into it by having faith. We know that it is there. We believe that it is there. We don't allow any thoughts to the contrary. Because when we really believe it, it is there for us. There's another Jew whose birthday we'll be celebrating in a few days, who taught us that lesson. It is done unto you as you believe. It is done unto you as you believe. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to light the candles of the menorah in celebration of Hanukkah. But I need to give you a little bit of, tell you a couple of things first. This is not how it's done in a traditional Hanukkah celebration. There, one candle is lit for every night of the 8 nights, okay? But we're not going to be here every night for 8 nights. Maybe you're going to be here for every night for 8 nights. I'm not going to be here every night for 8 nights, so we're going to light them all together, okay? And here's what I want you to do. As this is going on, I want you to take a moment, and I want you to reflect on how you can tap into your inner well. How you can find that hidden treasure, that hidden abundance that is there. And in doing so, how it allows your light to shine even brighter and a little longer than you ever thought was possible. And so I'm going to ask Paul and Yale, both of whom were raised in Jewish households, to come up. I told them I was leaving nothing to chance. And so Paul and Yale, We also have dreidels here if you want to take a look at them afterwards. Okay, so, excuse me while I give them a little instruction. So let's light this lamp. This is the thing, you're going to do it. Okay.
One prayer is about thanking Lord or God and giving us this holiday for lighting candles. Another prayer is thanking Lord or God, King of the universe, for giving us the commandments to make us better people and to celebrate the holidays as we did thousands of years ago. There's another one that we do on the first day. I'll do it now. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehegianu k'imanu v'higianu v'azman hazeh. That prayer is thanking God for giving us life, giving us health, and bringing us to another season.
It took a little faith, didn't it? It took a little faith. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much. I love that lesson. It wasn't staying lit. It wasn't staying lit. And yet, I could tell you all were sending your good vibes. I was sending my good vibes, and now here it is. This is beautiful. So again, I ask you to go within. Close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. And let's just think about that wellspring within, as it is represented by the menorah, represented by the story of Hanukkah. And yet each one of us has it. Each one of us has that wellspring within, because we are made of that essential energy, that essence, the source of all things, of all beings. It is the only energy there is, taking on limitless, a myriad of expressions. Each one of us unique, each one of us special, each one of us expressing that divine in our own way. And so we reach down right now into that wellspring, into that resource, into that energy. And we use it to allow our light to shine more brightly. And so as we go out into the world during this busy holiday season, and we interact with people, and we find ourselves thinking, I don't know if I can continue on, we reach in to that wellspring. We reach in to that essence, and we use it to allow our lights to shine more brightly. I know this is true. I give thanks for this truth. I let it be so. As together we affirm. And so it is. So it is. You guys ready to make some music? I want to keep the candles lit as long as we can.